This is the true history of Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 2. A recap from Chapter 4 Season 1 is that there's now a communist bloc and a democratic bloc. The communist bloc was led by Soviet Northern Russia, and the democratic bloc was led by the Anzac Nation. During this time, the Soviet Northern Russia needed more land. They needed more resources to fuel their economy, so they made a rift portal to rift in more territory to them, but the rift malfunctioned and teleported all of the land into the Anzac Nation's sphere of influence. The Anzac Nation quickly saw the opportunity and took all of the new land and inhabited it. A couple of weeks went by after this happened, and the Anzac Nation was booming in their industry. Meanwhile, in the communist bloc though, New Switzerland, now known as the Socialist Republic of New Switzerland, was angry that their nation got taken over. World War I soldier was still the leader of New Switzerland, but he wanted to get revenge, so he started planning with some of his people to start a revolution, a New Switzerland revolution to get freedom from the communist bloc. This was the start of the fall of the communist bloc. Soon after, New Switzerland declared independence again. Soviet Northern Russia sprung into action and started attacking the New Switzerland people to try and crush the revolution fast, but they failed greatly. Soonly after, Soviet Northern Russia was losing so bad that they asked their ally and puppet, Northern Basilia, to help them. Once Northern Basilia joined, they were also another communist nation, and they started to realize that Soviet Northern Russia wasn't as strong as they thought it was. So they started talking to the New Switzerland people and started saying, we might actually join the revolution against Russia. They also started talking to their southern neighbor, Southern Basilia, also known as the Democratic Republic of Basilia, to join back with them. Soonly after, Southern Basilia and Northern Basilia switched side to the New Switzerland people. The war was quickly won and Soviet Northern Russia lost. This was the end of communism for Soviet Northern Russia. After communism fell, Northern Basilia sought to join Southern Basilia, uniting Basilia finally, and the New Switzerland renamed itself to the Kingdom of Fortnite and gained some land from the old Soviet Northern Russia. Soviet Northern Russia had to ditch communism and turn into, once again, Northern Russia. After this though, Northern Russia was greatly mad, and they sought a new ideology, a fascist ideology. They turned fascist soonly after the communism fell, and the leader, Bruce, was still kept control of his power. Bruce, with this new ideology, changed the name to Fascist Russia, and he sought to re-establish pre-World War V borders for Northern Russia. Northern Russia then started World War VI soonly after. World War VI started with Russian forces invading the Kingdom of Fortnite. Soonly after, the Democratic Republic of Basilia also joined the war, but then it was found out that secretly Russian forces sneaked deep into Anzac territory and went into the 0 point and got help from someone. This person's name was Seeker. Since Seeker was back on the island, the Anzac Nation and the Kazakh Republic joined the war. This was terrible news for Fascist Russia, but Seeker did not even care for Fascist Russia and the leader Bruce. He only cared on killing as many Anzac people, and not just Anzac but everyone on the island. But soonly after, Fascist Russia collapsed, and this was the end of the Northern Russian people in general. Northern Russia and the nation itself was then dissolved. The people that won the war, aka the coalition forces, then carved up the old Northern Russian lands, and this was a start of a new era for the island. During the carve-up, Seeker had managed to sneak out and reach the 0 point to escape back to his server. Seeker was also gone for now, and this was the start of a new era for the island, since the Anzac Nation had won its bid as a superpower of the island. Meanwhile, at the Snow region, the Cassock Republic grew 10 times larger. The leader Broly was greatly encouraged of this, but he grew wary and became quite fanatical. See, the Cassock Republic and Broly mainly wanted the whole Snow region under one nation, under the Cassock Republic. See, the Cassock Republic and the Anzac Nation always hated each other, ever since they got invaded by the Anzac Nation in World War V. So after Fascist Russia was defeated, they left the alliance that they had with the Anzac Nation. The Anzac Nation, led by Dipolomoon, was greatly mad by this, and they knew that the Cassock Republic was planning to unite the whole Snow region under one banner, under the Cassock Republic. So border clashes started happening against the Cassock Republic with the Anzac Nation, and it was setting up to another world war against the Cassock Republic. This war would be called World War VII. World War VII would start off as the Anzac Nation preemptively struck the Cassock Republic and started the invasion of Lonely Labs. They quickly won Lonely Labs and started pushing towards the capital, but they failed to encircle the capital. So they got their puppet, the Democratic Republic of Basilia, to join. But as this was happening, the Kingdom of Fort Devant joined the war and started blitzing through the Snow region as well. Soonly after, the Cassock Republic collapsed and got their pre-World War VI borders back. After the war, the Democratic Republic of Basilia got their independence fully back and were no longer a puppet. They were greatly happy since they were a puppet since World War V. And the Cassock Republic was no longer occupied by the Anzac Nation, and Broly was still the leader of the Cassock Republic, but Broly was still much angry that he lost all of his territory that he gained during World War VI. So Broly called to meet World War I soldier, the leader of the Kingdom of Fort Devant. He wanted to talk to him about a plan that he was thinking about. This plan was to take out the Anzac Nation as the global superpower once and for all. The Kingdom of Fort Devant was quite intrigued of what he said, because he wanted to be the global superpower himself. World War I soldier was keen to hear what he had to say. So they talked about the plan, and the plan was quite simple. Broly knew of this person in the Anzac Nation. He was the state governor of the Misty State, and his name was Nick. He knew that Nick wanted his own nation in the Misty State, but the Anzac Nation had denied his offer since they wanted to keep the region united. So Broly told World War I soldier that he had talked to Nick and agreed that Nick would start a revolution, but Nick said that he would try to make a agreement with Dipolomoon to make a referendum. This referendum would be on should the Misty State leave the Anzac Nation and become its own nation. But World War I soldier was hesitant. He said to Broly, what if the Misty State doesn't become independent? And Broly said, well, then we would preemptively strike and Nick would start a revolution to get independence and the Anzac Nation would be crushed for sure. So the plan was put into motion. So Nick asked for a referendum, but long story short, Nick lost the referendum. So Nick declared independence in this small city that was in the Misty State, and the World War VII had officially started. See, Dipolomoon was visiting some of the colonies at the time, so Pac-Man was in charge, and Pac-Man knew that something was up. Soonly after, Broly declared war, and the Kingdom of Fort Devant was seeming to declare war as well. But luckily, Pac-Man dissolved the problem and crushed the revolution. But as soon as Dipolomoon heard of this, World War VIII started. He declared war on the Cassock Republic and started his invasion. The invasion started quite well, and he slowly pushed, but the Cassock Republic could not withstand this, and they capitulated. But the Anzac Nation knew that the Kingdom of Fort Devant was also involved, so he also declared war, but but the only thing he wanted was the snow region of the Kingdom of Fort Devon. The Kingdom of Fort Devon accepted this proposal and surrendered as well. After this, the Cassock Republic was balkanized and totally divided up. There was no longer going to be a united snow region under the Cassock Republic, but many other states that were free and independent. Many other people in the Anzac Nation wanted to start their own nations, including such as Darth Knight, Mick, OX, and many others, including Bruce, the old leader of Northern Russia. So they all went and started their own nations. During this time, Mick, as the leader of the Kingdom of the Lonely Mountains, annexed the United States of Fortnite, and the Kingdom of Scandinavia united with the Ice Kingdom, making the Kingdom of Scandinavia. But a new plot was starting to be formed. See, World War I soldier hated the Anzac Nation for taking his territory, so he started talking to some of the new nations. He talked to Newfoundland, he talked to the Lonely Mountain and the Kingdom of Scandinavia to form this new alliance called the Six Kingdoms Alliance. This alliance's end goal was to totally destroy the Anzac Nation. The Anzac Nation was so mad about this, they formed their own alliance called the Anti-Six Kingdoms Alliance. The Six Kingdoms Alliance was greatly mad about this as well, since it was called Anti-Six Kingdoms Alliance. See, but World War I soldier's plot was quite simple. His plot was to make more nations so he could have more attack turns to totally destroy the Anzac Nation. So some of his allies started making new nations. For example, the Kingdom of Scandinavia splitted apart and the Ice Kingdom was back and Scandinavia was just Scandinavia. Also, the Kingdom of Fort Devon made a new nation called the Kingdom of Nazareth, or the Federal Republic of Nazareth. And also, the Lonely Mountain formed a new nation called the Kingdom of Arctic Spikes. When this was happening, the Anzac Nation and its allies declared war on Soviet Northern Russia, since Soviet Northern Russia declared war on the AFK Nation. This war was quick and fast, but in result, that Soviet Northern Russia switched sides to the Six Kingdoms Alliance, and this was getting set up for World War IX. World War IX started all suddenly when the Kingdom of Fort Devon thought the time was finally right to declare war on the Anzac Nation. The Anzac Nation was not prepared for this, so the war finally started. It started in the Cassock Republic region of the Snow region, and the Six blitzed through this region quite far. After that, the Anzac Nation saw no hope on continual war, so they seek to surrender. This was the devastating defeat of the Anzac Nation and its allies. But see, the Polar Moon and Pac-Man did not realize how far World War I soldier wanted to go. But his plan was finally revealed. See, World War I soldier totally reshaped what the server's borders looked like and made himself the new leader of the whole island. And what he did with Pac-Man and the Polar Moon was he killed them off and sent them to this realm called the Abyss. This realm was dark and desolate, and the Polar Moon and Pac-Man did not know what to do, but they still had contact to the island. See, Purple still contacted the Abyss and found the Polar Moon and Pac-Man there. But soonly after this happened, Purple somehow convinced the whole island to bring back Pac-Man, since Pac-Man was just the right-hand man of the Polar Moon, not the real enemy. See, Purple was wanting to help the Polar Moon come back and take back the server to free everyone from the evil dictator of World War I soldier. Since Pac-Man was back on the island, he started doing his thing, trying to recruit people to his little small land that he owned in Frenzy Fields. He also was neighboring Broly's nation, just called Broly's nation, but he tried to convince and try and manipulate the other nations to fight each other, to try and give time to an opportunity, so World War I soldier needed to bring back the Polar Moon. As this was happening, Purple was the unofficial leader of Megacy as he started his underground movement and his resistance against World War I Soldier and his many allies that he now had. After many days of negotiating with the Kingdom of Fort Devant, Pac-Man somehow finally brought back the Polar Moon. The Polar Moon had to be a prisoner of World War I Soldier and had to be his slave. But Pac-Man knew that this could be the start of taking down World War I Soldier. And this was a correct statement that Pac-Man had, because soonly after this happened, the Imperial Roman Empire, led by Darth Knights, accused World War I Soldier of helping the Polar Moon come back. This was true, but World War I Soldier didn't really want the Polar Moon at all, so he started making a secret plan to manipulate Pac-Man and the Polar Moon into thinking that there was going to be a new world war about to start, but this was all part of World War I Soldier's plan. See, at this time, World War I Soldier and his allies thought that the Polar Moon and Pac-Man weren't allies anymore, or even friends. See, Pac-Man and the Polar Moon made a fake message and leaked it purposely and made it like the Polar Moon and Pac-Man had a massive fight. This was all part of their plan, but it didn't really end up well at the end. Many days had gone by and tension reached a boiling point. The Kingdom of Fort Devant was now at war with the Imperial Roman Empire and its allies. The Kingdom of Fort Devant had its allies. See, the Polar Moon saw the opportunity and told Pac-Man that we had to reveal their plan so we could get back onto the island. So the Polar Moon knew that leaking all of this information to World War I Soldier could ruin their plan, but he had to do it. So he told that World War I Soldier that him and Pac-Man were still friends and were planning to get back the Anzac region's land, but that was right into World War I Soldier's hand. See, World War I Soldier wanted a confession that Pac-Man and the Polar Moon were still friends. As soon as he got this information, all of the nations turned towards Pac-Man's small little nation and invaded it. It didn't last that long, and Pac-Man was also killed. He was also thrown into the abyss with the Polar Moon, and Purple and his ally Broly were the only people that could have resisted World War I Soldier. It seemed like all hope was lost. It was him and Pac-Man in the abyss, slowly contemplating on all the decisions that they made. But then someone communicated to them through the abyss. See, someone from a different server communicated to them. It was Seeker. Seeker was the one that communicated to them and said, "Hey, I've heard of everything that's gone on, and I have something to tell you." The Polar Moon did not want to hear what he had to say, because beforehand the whole of Chapter 3 was him and Seeker fighting constantly. But Seeker had a really good opportunity. You could say it was a redemption arc. See, Seeker wanted to be friends with the Polar Moon. See, he hated how the Polar Moon and him fought for all that time and still hated each other. So he heard that World War I Soldier took control of the island, and he saw that his opportunity to help the Polar Moon could be finally succeeded. He said to Topola, "Hey, I know we've fought so long, and I heard that World War I Soldier finally took you out." Topola said, "Yeah, that's no new news for us. What do you want from us?" And Seeker said, "I have an opportunity. See, I'm willing to help you take back the server." Topola was hesitant to get friendship from his old enemy, but his enemy was now his friend, and the Polar Moon accepted this. He wanted to turn a new leaf as well. So the Polar Moon and Seeker started planning his operation to make it back to the island. Seeker and Depola discussed then for many weeks on how they could return back to the island, but then Depola finally had a new plan. The plan was to contact Broly. He then asked through the abyss to Purple, "Hey, contact Broly, we need to talk." And Broly came and wanted to talk to Depola. He knew Depola was a good guy, and even though they fought for so long as well as the Cassock Republic, Depola Moon and Broly knew that they needed to stop World War I Soldier. And the plan was quite simple. Broly would ask World War I Soldier if they could bring back Depola and Pac-Man, but have them as his slaves since they've caused him so much trouble. This was all part of the plan. He then went to World War I Soldier and asked of this, and World War I Soldier surprisingly accepted the idea. Then the plan would carry on by Depola Moon annexing the nation that Broly took and taking leadership. Then he would go to the 0 point and get all of Seeker's soldiers, and Seeker's soldiers would join the Polar Moon's new nation called Free Anzac and would try and attack Nick's nation, and then from there the whole server. This was finally the build-up to World War X, the final war of the season. World War X would start as expected from the plan by the Free Anzac forces invading the Chechen Empire led by Nick. Nick was not on to help defend his own nation, so the nation of Team Fortress 2 led by Bruce was gonna help out in trying to defend Nick's nation. But the Polar Moon and all of Seeker's allies that helped the Polar Moon all stormed the lands of the old Anzac nation and conquered it quite quickly. Then it was a domino effect. Slowly but surely the Ice Kingdom capitulated and the Imperial Roman Empire then capitulated. Then the Kingdom of Arctic Spites would get invaded and many other nations would get invaded. The Kingdom of Fort Devant was only the last nation left. World War I soldier did not know what to do. He thought that he finally controlled the server, but he obviously didn't. This was the end of the road for him. And as the Free Anzac forces and Seeker's soldiers slowly converged onto the Citadel, they heard a gunshot rung out from the Citadel Palace. World War I soldier had unalived himself. Suddenly, the war for the server had finally been ended, and World War X had ended. After this, the Polar Moon took ownership of the server again and said goodbye to his newfound ally Seeker. Seeker and his soldiers now were friends, but Seeker did not want to join back in the server after getting an offer from the Polar Moon. Seeker said that he had his own troubles in his own servers, but the Polar Moon said, "We're always here to help." But now there was one problem: the server. The server of constant wars that happened during the season made it unstable. It was so unstable that there was earthquakes starting to happen underneath the island, and the island was predicted to have a massive collapse in the center of the island. But the Polar Moon, as the Anzac nation, or now called the Anzac Empire, re-established many old nations, but the server wasn't the same. See, the server suffered greatly during this time. But the Polar knew that the rebuild process would take long, and he set it up next season of Fortnite. This season would be called Chapter 4 Season 3, and as the prediction of the earthquake happening, it came true, and the center of the island collapsed. This was a new era of the server, and a new era that will be continued in the next part.